for this demo, we're going to create a new project and we're going to call the MERN architecture. So MERN stands for the MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. So for those who are familiar with MERN, it's easy to say that they're all the same concept. So just for this demo, we're going to combine that with TypeScript. And later on, we're going to compile this project into Docker. So let's begin. To start with, let us create a new folder. We want to name this as MERN. Now inside this folder, let's create another folder. Let's split into two, which is the API. The other one is app. Now, whenever operating system that you're using right now, it doesn't matter as long we have the pattern. So API serves as the server, while the app serves as the front end. So this is typically the back and the front. Now, as for our starters, let's begin modifying or create the components for the API. So let's work on that. To start with, let us open our API. Just simply right click, open with VS Code. All right. So from this section here, open the integrated terminal. So let's start by typing npm init-y. Okay, so let's clear this up. Now for our very basic, let's begin first with Express by typing npm install express. Okay, next, let us also install Nodemon. So let's clear this up by typing npm install Nodemon. For Nodemon, I want to store that in our dep dependencies. So let's begin by typing hyphen hyphen save of save hyphen dep. Very good. So let's clear this up. Let's check our package.json and there you go. Next, we're going to create a new file. We're going to name this as index.js. So same goes. Let's call the cons express require express. Then from here, let's assign that to app. Then let's assign also the port. For this demo, I'm going to assign this to port 3000. And then let's apply that to app listen. Let's bring down our port. Then from here, let's apply the execution. To display the message, let us type console log. Let's begin by typing server running at localhost. So let's make it a URL by typing http:// forward slash, then another colon, going to add this port. So let's make it readable by typing this tilde here. Then let's add the dollar sign, and there you go. Okay, good. So now let's make a URL request. Let's begin by typing app.get forward slash. Then let's include the rec address. Okay, for our first request, we're going to send the message hello world. Okay, so let's try this now by typing node index.js. There you go. So let's try that by clicking this link here. Okay, so this is working. So now let's combine this with NodeMon. So head over to this section here. Let's replace this section by typing start. Then let's type NodeMon. Then state the index.js. Now to run this one, let us type npm start. And there you go. So let's try this one. Okay, good. It's working. Okay, so we're done on the first part. Next, let us work now with Typescript. So let's cancel this execution. Now for the TypeScript, let's begin by npm install. Now for the packages, we're going to start with types/express. Okay, next add types slash, okay, so this should be types. So the next one should be node. Now next to this one, I'm going to install the ts node and TypeScript. So we're going to save that as def dependencies by typing hyphen hyphen save hyphen def. So let's review. So what we need are these are the following requirements for TypeScript. So we need to specify the TypeScript for Express. So that includes the node, TS node. That's one of the requirement. This emphasizes the reference for our TypeScript. And lastly, we need the TypeScript itself. So let's install that. Okay, good. So once done, make sure you check your def dependencies. So if everything is in place, let's move down to the next step. So from here, let's create a new file. So we're going to name this as tsconfig.json. So this is the configuration for our TypeScript. Now make sure you follow the exact spelling and abbreviation. Now to start with, let's begin by setting up the following. So first is the compiler option. And from here, let's emphasize the target. So for our target, I'll be using this ES5 for the module. Let's begin or selecting this common JS. Now, please take note, we'll be using only the minimal requirements. So if you have some other settings beside this one, you may do so. But for now, let's just emphasize this small configuration setup. Okay, that should be true. Next, we need to force concasing in files. So let's set that to true. Okay, so that's the for compiler options. Next, let's do include the things, anything within that folder or within this project. I'm going to check if there's a TypeScript files. Now for the exclude, for now, the only folders or files that we can exclude is the node modules. Let's save that. So this is a small configuration. So for now, this is okay. So if you want to extract to more, it's okay. So as long we have this tsconfig configuration, then everything should be okay. Okay, so since we're already done with tsconfig, let's work now on this index.js. Let's rename this to TypeScript. Now for our TypeScript, since we already convert that, we need to ensure that we're going to apply now the TypeScript just for this one. So let's begin by importing or change this reference to TypeScript by typing import request response. So we need to import the package here, which is this express. Okay. Also, since we already have this express, we can simply add this express in the reference like this. Okay. So now that we have the reference already, so let's apply those reference for requests. Let's add that in here. Same goes with response. Okay, good. So once everything is in place, let's try running this code. Okay, so we're missing, or we have an error. Cannot find module. Okay, so before we going to start this code, make sure we modified also the package.json. Head back to your package.json. Then from here, replace this file with TypeScript. Okay, good. So now we're reading the TypeScript. So let's try now running this code. And there you go. So let's try this now. All right. So good. So this one is working. On our next step, we'll be working now on the MongoDB. So let's start on that. But first, we need to cancel this one. As part of the requirements, we're going to install another package. So this time, I'm going to install First, let's begin installing the .env. So we'll be using the .env environment. And the next one, we're going to install the Mongoose. Same goes, I'm going to save that in dep dependencies. Let's press start. Make sure at this point here, you have a MongoDB installed on your system. As part of the requirements, then you need to install any app that will read the database itself. So just for this demo, I install a application which is a free package online. You can simply download this one. This is the NoSQL Booster for MongoDB. Now, for this to work, make sure you install the MongoDB. So not necessary to use this one, but you can also use any application as long it supports MongoDB. Okay, so to use this one, simply install the package or the application and then connect using this button here. Then once done, you will see a lot of stuff here. Now, I have already done an example from my previous demo. So I'm going to delete this one because right now, if you scan this information, so this is the MongoDB I created for just for this testing. So since we're going to work that from scratch, I'm going to delete this database. Okay, let's delete this one. Okay, good. So right now, we'll be having a very basic or very startup database for this Mongo. Now there's another cases. You can also install MongoDB from the VS Code. So simply head over to this extension, then look for Mongo. Okay, so there are a lot of application or extension here. I think the best is to select this type of application. So this is the MongoDB for VS Code. So there is also another batch from here. I just want to use, or I prefer to use this section or this type of extension. So let's try this one. So either way, you can use any from the option that I mentioned just now. So to connect using the MongoDB locally from VS Code, just simply select the icon from here, then click Add Connection. Then from here, as you can see, we have these two connection type. So the first one is connection string, while the second one is the connection settings for form. So either way, but I much prefer to use this open form. So let's work on this one. Okay, as you can see, it has already the standard connection. So using this default form, we can simply say this is much easier than the connection string. So let's try this one. Just click connect. Okay, good. So once you see this message successfully connected, which means your Mongo is workable in VS Code. So let's explore that by clicking this section here. Okay, so same goes. So for the purpose of this dev, this is for us to monitor the development or every or any operation that we're going to do in our backend. We're going to see that locally using the preferred VS Code MongoDB app. So this is the perfect application just for this demo. Okay, so let's head back now to our code. Okay, now since we managed to install now the package for our MongoDB and also the .env, the next thing we need to do now is let's work first on the .env. Now for that to work, on your root section, let's create a new file and we're going to name this as .env. So .env, sir, other known as the environment, this serves as our global variables. So this is a reference for the entire code that we're going to work on. To begin with this one, I'm going to add two of these variables. So let's start with server port. For our server port, which is the node, I'm going to set that to port. Okay, so let's make sure we're going to use the same port that we used earlier. So just for this demo, I use 3000. So I'm going to use also 3000 for this demo. Okay, so next, I'm going to apply also the MongoDB or the Mongo URL. Now, for our Mongo URL, okay, for our Mongo URL, we're going to use the default local. Although there's already a MongoDB online, you can also apply that in here. So either way, as long your MongoDB is accessible, that should be okay. So since I already installed this locally, so I'll just use the local default mongodb colon slash slash. Okay, so this should be the local port 270117. Okay. Now in here, we need to specify the database that we're going to work for the entire backend. So just for this demo, I'm going to name this as MyDB. Now, if you prefer to use the capital or small, doesn't matter. But it would be best to use the small case just to be safe whenever we create it or connecting our database. So that's it. That's the requirements for our .env. So next, we're going to work now on the MongoDB connection. So let's begin on working on that. Before we proceed, I just realized since we're working with front end, which is React, this will serve as a conflict between the front end and the back end. So since React is using 3000 as the default, it will be best for our backend to choose for another port. So just for this demo, I will replace this 3000 to 4000. All right. So this will save us from many changes later on. So that's it, guys. So at this point here, we're ready now in creation of our database connection. Let's work on that. Start with, let us create a new folder and I'm going to name this as src or source. Then inside this source folder, let's create another folder and we're going to name this as config. Within this config folder, let's create a new file. I'm going to name this as connection.typescript, right? So at this point here, we're going to set now the connection. To begin with, let's import the .env by typing import.env. Now, since we're working with TypeScript, let's apply or slash the config here. So this is the format for calling or applying the .env. Next, let's import now our mongoose. Okay, good. Once done, let us begin now creating the function by typing export async. So this is an asynchronous. So let's replace this to connect. All right. So next, from here, let's apply this try and catch. For our catch, let's apply or add a message for this one. Okay, good. So next, in our try, let's assign a variable. Going to name this as URI. Since we're working with TypeScript, let's convert that to string. And then at this point here, let's apply now the .env by typing process.env. Now, so what it does is we're going to call now the global variables for our URI. So this is the URL. To call that, head over to our .env. Let's copy this Mongo URL. Okay, so before we're going to close this one, we need to ensure that this is also converted as string. Since TypeScript doesn't know this one, so let's rewrite this as reference for our Mongo URL environment. Now we have some few things from here. The first thing is we need to import now the Mongoose to connect this URI. The next one, oh, but before going to connect this one, let's assign this first to promises. So this will serve as a global connection to our backend. All right. So the first one is we declare this as a global connection for the entire code. The next one is for connecting using URI. And the third one, let's call now the connection. So in here, we have two types of properties that we're going to add. The first one is the once, if open, while the second one is the on, if there's an error. So let's work first with the open. If if this one is open, let's pass a message that says console dot. Okay, so for this message, let's say going to say that this database was successfully connected. All right, so same goes. Now, how about if there's an error? So for our error, we're going to apply this console.error. So safe to say, going to say that connecting to MongoDB, I'm going to pass down here the error. Now, for that error, I'm going to assign that in here. All right. So basically, these are the basic connection for our MongoDB connection. So that's it. Good. Next, since we're going to create a MVC structure for our backend, let's begin by creating those folder. Now, for our first folder, let's create a folder named controllers. Okay. So next, as part of the requirements, will be needed also the models and also the routes. So later on, we're going to construct the MVC structure to call upon our connection and do some stuff as part of the operation. So these are the folders needed for this backend. So let's work one by one. To start with, let us focus on the models first. From here, let's create a new file. I'm going to name this as movies.typescript. Also, we're going to need the interface for this one. So let's create another file. Let's create or name this as iMovies.typescript. Okay, so these are the two important things for this model. Now, to begin with, model serves as the table schema for our MongoDB. Now, this will serve as a reference to to handle or store our information. Now, what are the things that we need from here? First, we need to import. So the first two properties from here is we're going to need the model and the schema. Now, these are all sourced from Mongoose. All right. And next, let's also import the interface. But right now, we don't have the information yet. Just to emphasize this one, we need to call that from our .iMovies. Now, before we proceed on the entire schema, let us work first with our interface. So since we're dealing with TypeScript, very important to reference everything on your coding. Now, let's begin by selecting this iMovies. To begin with, let's import the padding. First, we need the document. Second, we need also the types. All right. Next to that, we're going to create an export for the interface. So we're going to name this as iMovie with extend or extends document. Now, what are the things needed for our documents is the first one, we need the title. So this is a with a string properties. Next, will be need also the description, also a string. Let's save that. Okay, so we only needed only these two column. So next, with this reference, we can now import that in our movies model. Now for our movies model, let's extract that by calling iMovie. Okay, so that will hold our reference. And then let's call now the export cons. I'm going to name this as movie schema with new schema. Okay, so this is the format. Now next. So from here, we need to define now the columns. So for the columns, let's begin by calling title. So here, let's specify the properties. Like the type, it should be string. Also, we're going to set this to required to true. All right. So same goes. Let's copy this entire thing and going to add now the description. All right. So these are the main important things to begin with. Now next, since we already have this one, I would like also to include the timestamp. So within this section here, place a comma. In here, down below, we're going to set the timestamp. So this will add the date for the update at and create at. Okay, I'm going to set this to true. Okay, so take note the groups. So this is the first group. Outside within that group, we create a timestamp. All right. So the last one is we're going to export this information. Now let's begin by typing, okay, should I say, I'm going to remove this one. Okay. So this is where we're going to set our export. Going to set to default. Okay. So there's also a hiding here. Cannot find me default. Ah, it should be default. Okay, good. Okay, from here, let's now add the models for this one. So let's call the model. But before that, let's add also the interface. Okay. So for our interface, let's name this schema to movie. Okay. And then from here, next to our schema, let's add this reference movie schema. Okay, so and there you go. So this is all we need for our models. Now with these models, we can now connect this to our coding in the next few steps. All right, so let's proceed on the next part. Now that we're done with our models, the next thing we need to do now is to set up now the main body of our system. So let's begin. Within the root of source, inside this folder, create an index.typescript. From here, let's import or construct the class for this entire body. So let's begin by import express. Okay, so from here, let's also import the request and the response. This is from express. Okay, so this is one of the thing. Now, let's create now the class for this one. So to start with, let's begin by typing export default class, and we're going to name this as application. Right? Okay, good. So this is the this will be hold as our main body. Now, to start with, let us declare first the public. Let's say going to assign an app as a variable. that would hold the express application. It should be public. Okay, good. So from within this class, let's create a constructor. Okay, so what are the things that we need in our constructor? So the first one, I'm going to create a module or function. So let's say, let's add the middleware. Okay, so that's the first one. Now next, I'll be needing also the routes. So let me copy this one, right? And the last one, we're going to create a startup for our main body. So we're going to name that as start. Now for our start, safe to say we can copy that from our index.typescript in this section. So we can copy this one, right? So from here, so first let's call the ports or the port. Now for our reference, since our port is already declared in .env, this one. So let's copy this, or rather, let's copy this one. Okay, so I want to place that in here. Now, remember how did we included that in our form earlier? So to take effect, we need to add another reference in here. So we need to import the .env. Okay, so this will serve as our, or you can say a function that will recognize our .env. Now for this to work, let's begin by typing process.env. Okay, so this is where our variables comes in. All right. Now next, since we already copied this one, so this is already part of the body itself. So for the app, let's add this by typing or typing this that app. Okay. Okay, good. So everything now is in place. So next is we need to attach that to our constructor. Now for our constructor, let's begin by this app equals to express. Next, we need to include also the middleware. Also, we're going to include also the routes. Okay, good. So at this point here, we managed to build our main body. Now, earlier, we already made the connection, which is this connection.typescript. So we're going to import that in the main body. Now to call that, going to add here, import asterisk as, going to name that as db from. So let's get that connection. Okay, good. So from here, let's apply that in our constructor and we assign the connect properties. All right. Okay, good. So at this point here, we managed to add the DB or the database connection. Now to complete this one, let us modify now this index.typescript. So since we already made the main body inside the source, so this time, let's change this interface to the initialization coding for us, or it's a trigger point to our main source body. Now to write that, let's begin with import. Okay, so let's call that as an app. From here, let's specify the source location. Right. So let's assign that to a variable called app to new app. And from here, let's define the functions start, and there you go. So we call the function start, as you recall, this is the main or the start of this application. All right. So to try this one, let's begin or open our terminal. Okay. So from here, make sure you close everything. So let's begin by typing npm start. And there you go. So the first connection is we set up the connection for the server. So this line here is already works. Plus the connection to database. So this one is also working. So that's it. So this point here, we manage now to run the connectivity between our backend and our database. So on next step, let's proceed on how to connect everything within this main coding here. So let's move to that. On our next step, let's create now the controller. So from here, focus on this controllers folder. Let's create a new file, and we're going to name this as movie controller. All right. So from here, let's import the following. So let's import the request and response. Right. So from here, let's begin now creating our class by typing export class, and we need to state the name of the class, which is movie controller. All right. So for our first function, let's create function. Okay, but first we need to type this, and we're going to name this as get all movies. So let's apply now the rec and res. So from here, let's specify the promise, and should be void. And let's close this up. Now for rec and res, let's add now the reference. There you go. So that's it. So that's our first function for our controller. So to work on that, let's add now or apply the models first before we proceed on this part. So to begin with, let's import now the models. So let's start with the model movie. Okay, so if you recall, we created that earlier. So we're going to need that in this section. All right. So aside from movies, we're going to need also the interface. So to do that, let's import also the interface. All right. So these are the things, these are the very important section for our coding. Now, let's begin now apply that to our key get all movies. So to start with, let's add the try and catch. Okay, for the errors, let's uh, set the throw error if there's an error. Okay, so next, now for our coding, let's begin by assigning this section to a variable, and we're going to name this as movies. Now, from our movies, let's add now the interface for this one, and we're going to assign that in a object. Next, since we're using asynchronous here, let's begin by calling the await, and then let's bring down the movie. So let's execute first the first command. Okay, should be this should be equals, and we're assigning the function find. So from this point here, we're calling the entire or all this movie or this data from our movies. So let's all right. So let's modify this section here. So next is we need to send that as request, but this time let's assign that to a status 200, and then we call up upon the JSON. Oh, for JSON, let's apply now this variable. For the variable, so let's add that, and there you go. Now let's review this section. So I said a movie here, and seems it's not readable for this section. So let's check first why is it this one has a problem. Right? So I think I know the problem here. So from here, so notice here, so it has a format instead of using the typical the with the curly braces, we can simply direct that. So let's remove these curly braces here, right? So that should work. So that's it, guys. So this now, at this point here, we manage now to create our get all movies. Now, on our next step, we need to import that to our routes. So for that to work, let's step over to our routes. Okay. So from here, let's create a file name, and we're going to name this as movie routes. Okay. So what it does is we're going to import the controller. So let's begin by typing or import our router, right? Oops. So from here, let's import now our controllers. Okay, good. Okay, now that we import our controllers, let's create now our class. To begin with, let's type export class. And same goes, let's just call these as movie routes. All right. So there are a few things here that we need to apply. The first thing is, let's create a public declaration for our router. Okay, so that's the first one. Okay, this should be router. Next, let's declare or create another. Okay, so this is a reference for our controller. So let's begin by typing public. Let's name that as movie controller. Okay, so what it does is this controller will be assigned to a controller or movie controller, and then make sure we need to renew the connection by typing new movie controller. All right, so that's it. So that's all we need for the public declaration. Now next, let's begin working on the constructor. So from here, let's bring down our router. Okay, and then we're going to assign this to routes or router. All right. Now, at this point here, let's create now the function for our routes. So let's begin by typing these routes. Okay, so for now, we don't have this one yet. So let's create that function next to our constructor. Okay, so for our first routes, let's call down or call the router. Then let's execute the get. Right. So from here, okay. So from here, let's bring down the controller. So let's start by this movie controller that get all these, or rather, just got all movies. Now, to specify this correctly, since we're dealing with the root part, I'm going to add a meaningful URL from here. So let's say I'm going to call this as all movies. Okay, good. So this is the routes that we're going to fetch to get all routes from this, right? So that's it for routes. And lastly, going to connect that routes to our main bodies. Now, to do that, let's head over to our index.typescript. Then let's import that. Let's call for the movie routes, right? So this is the routes class. And then let's apply that to our routes. Now, in our body section, we need to specify that in this function here. So let's begin by calling this app and use. Now for our root, okay. So for our root, let's begin with the root section for the, let's say, start with API slash movies. All right, and then So let's start with uh, adding that routes by typing new movie routes. Then we need to specify the properties of router. And there you go. Okay, so we have few things here. So the first one is the root, which is the API slash movies. And within that uh, routes, we have also specified this one here, which is the slash all movies. Now to test this one, let's head over to our browser. All right, so this is the current URL. So now let's connect those URL in this section. Let's start first with the index.typescript. So from here, but first I need to add one more slash since we already have our starting URL. And then let's copy this link here. So just make sure you save that and then head over to our URL. So let's paste that URL. Okay, okay, good. So that's the root URL. So next, from here, head over to our routes, and we're going to apply also this all movies. Okay, good. So from here, let's add to the last extension. And once done, press enter, and there you go. So at this point here, this is workable. But since this is a new entry, so for now, we don't have the data yet. Okay, good. So let's proceed now on those on the next CRUD operation. So let's head over to our movie controllers. So from here, let's copy everything from here. Let's paste that. And let's rename this one to create movie. Now, for our first entry here, we need to clear this up. Okay, so what are the things that needed for this one? So the first thing is we need to assign or extract the data coming from our request body. So from our request body, let's extract that. So that should be rec.body, right? So from here, let's assign the movie by calling, let's say, cons movie. And then from here, let's call this model movie. Okay, so what are the things needed for this one to work? So the first one is let's add the properties of movie, the title, also the movie, that description. So let's add those things. So from our request body, let's assign that to our title and description, just like this. And then, so we have some few things from here. So the first one is okay. So the first one is let's assign a variable that holds the new movie. So this is the information to be added. And then let's add also the interface reference. And from here, let's assign this await. And then let's call down the variables. So let's call the movie. That's it. Okay, so this was taken from this variable here. So for our save, it should be close parenthesis. Okay, so that's the first one. The next one is we're going to bring down all the movies. Okay, so same goes. Let's bring the interface and let's store that to our object. And then let's bring down our movie. And for this to work, we're going to assign, okay, this should be taken from the models. And let's bring down the line. So remember how we call everything from our get. So same goes, we'll just follow that format. All right. So next, so the next thing we need to do now is we need to assign that or apply that to our response. So let's call that by typing res status. Let's assign a message. Let's say if everything is okay, let's assign that to or indicate that as 200. And then let's bring down the JSON. Okay, so similar to this one, let's make an open and close parenthesis with a curly braces here. So we have some few things from here. So first one is let's pass the message. So for our message, let's say movie successfully added. And then let's add now the movie. So what are the things needed from here? So first we need the new movie. Okay, so that's for our movie. Next, the last one is let's bring down also the all movies for that particular table. So since we assign that in an object, so let's bring down that all movies. Okay, so that's all what we need. Okay, good. So that's it. Now next, since we already created our function, the next thing we need to do now is we need to apply that in our routes. So let's head over to our routes. So focus in this section. Let's call this router dot host. Okay, so in here, okay, so let's define this one. So since we're doing a create function, we can say um, we can add in this manner. So let's type create movie. All right. So same goes. So with this URL, let's call now the function. Okay, good. So we have now the following. Now for this to work, we're going to use the erase REST API apt. So since we already installed that in our earlier discussion, if you recall from our previous demo, I installed this Thunder client. So we're going to use that Thunder client for this example. So for our from our Thunder client, okay, so going to delete everything from here. Now to test our Thunder client, let's begin first the basic one. So let's say I'm going to copy this. Okay, so this is for the all movies. So now, since we're dealing now with the create, so let's create a new request. So just same goes, I just paste the URL from here, and then let's replace everything from, let's say, API movies in this section. Okay, so from here, instead of get, it should be post, and then head over to our routes. Let's copy this, create movie. Okay, so from here, so let's apply that. Okay, good. So take note, this is the root, and this is our routes request. Since we're using post, so we're going to select post as well. Now, same goes, we need now to insert this value. Now, if you recall, we assign the variable title and also the description. So for our example, let's say you can try anything, but this is only a demo. So let's say you want to type what is. So I'm going to say this is a Netflix adaptation. Adaptation. Okay, so with this example, let's try posting this request. So let's try that one. Okay, and there you go. So for now, we have an error because our request is not recognizable internally by our host. So if you recall from our previous demo, so we have already discussed this one. So let's fix that by having or heading to our index.typescript here. So this is where our middleware performs. So let's add those requirements. So the first thing is we need to add this dot app dot use. Now for that to interpret, we need one of the following. So first is the express.json. Okay, so this will read the JSON. And the next one is the app.use. Okay, so same goes. That's we'll be needing the express URL encoded. And within our URL encoded, let's apply this extended to. All right. So that's all uh, requirements or we need for this to translate. So this is only the only few things for this work. Now, since we already assigned that to our instructor, so nothing to worry. So please review this part here. Then once you're done, let's get back to the requests. Okay, here. Now, to test this one, let's, okay. So make sure your server is running and the database as well. So let's do the request again by pressing send, and there you go. All right. So this one is working. So let's add one more thing for this one. So let's say let's add Avengers, a Marvel and Disney movie. Okay, so this is only a test. So let's add one more time. And there you go. Now let's view that in all requests. So head back to this one, the get all. So from here, just click send, and there you go. Okay, so we have now the One Piece and the Avengers. So that's it for the create. Okay, next. Before we proceed on the next function, I would like to make a uniform for this URL here. So since I already split the URL from the create, so same goes. I want to make it a uniform to all URL. So very important to have a nice URL description here. So instead of combining to all movies like a while ago, so I'm going to put a hyphen or dash in between. Okay, so similar to what I created in this section. Okay, so that's it for the get request. Now let's proceed now on the next function. So head back to our movie controllers. And this time, let's copy now this create movie. Let's paste that in here. Let's change this to update movie. Now, what are the things needed for our demo? At first, I want to clear this section. Okay, so I'm just going to leave this REST JSON here and this request body. Now, for our update movie, I want to assign this to a variable. So let's add that to variable params. Okay, and next, let's add a ID request. So this will be the ID checking from our request. So let's begin by typing request dot params. Now for our params, I just specified ID. Oops, should be ID. Oh, all right. So movie ID here will represent as the checking for that particular column as to what these sections belong. So now, the next thing we need to do now is we need to assign a variable. Okay, so this is where our updates begin. So let's call by typing cons update movie. Okay, so but before that, let's also add the iMovie reference. Okay, now from here, it's either we're going to check that if there's a ready value or not. So I guess we're all okay now. So let's apply now by typing the await, and then let's bring down the models movie. Now for our operation for this one, let's apply the find by ID. Okay, so find by ID. Let's add that. So I guess better to use the find by ID and update. Okay, good. So what it does is it will search for the ID and then automatically update the value. So what are the things needed for this one? So first, what we need is the ID. Okay. So for the ID, let's call the movie ID as stated here. So this will be our reference. And then next to that, let's call also the params. Let's save that. Now that's all the things needed basically for the find by ID and update. Now to display or fetch the value. So we can say that we can copy that from here, these all movies. Okay, same goes, we still need the all movies. Okay, so that solves for the all movies. Now for the movie, let's get this variable and assign it here. All right. Now for the message, movie successfully updated. All right. So that's it. So that's everything we need for our update movie. Okay. So since we already have our update movie function, the next thing we need to do now is we're going to update now our routes. Now to update our routes, head over to our movie routes. So from here, let's apply that by typing this router. This time, let's apply the patch. Okay, so what are the requirements for this one? So for our, okay, so first, I want to specify this as update movie slash colon ID. All right, so we specifies the URL and the ID. So this is where we pass down our ID number. Then let's call now this function. Okay, so select here the update movie. Very good. So let's copy this now. Now head over to our Thunder client. Let's make a new request. Okay. So better we copy again earlier example. Should be until here. Let's paste that. Okay. Let's copy one more time. All right. So next, let's replace this to patch. Now to complete this request, let's head back again to our routes and copy this request. Okay, so what are the things needed for this one? So first and foremost, okay, so we'll be needing a body and the ID. So let's start first with this one. Okay, this all movies. So I want to update this last portion here. Let's copy that ID. All right. Then head over to our patch. Now replace this colon ID here. Oops. Let's do it one more time. There you go. So this is the ID reference for our update. So next, head over to our body. Now, if you recall, so this is Avengers and title and with the description. So that's safe to say we can copy this one. Let's assign that to our, oh, Okay, so let's, okay, good. Okay, now that we have our the information, what I'm going to do now is to change the details in the description. So let's say uh, this is a new update. Okay, so using the ID reference of the this one here. So let's modify the description. So that's all we need from here. So let's try this request now by clicking send, and there you go. So let's check now the updates right here. Okay, so this is from the updates. Okay, so this there here. And from the movies, okay, so here. So this is where the updates takes place. Now to verify match with this section, so just remember we have to output here the movies and the movie. Now to verify that that one clearly, so let's execute this get request, and there you go. So that's it for updates. Okay, next, let's step over to our movie controllers. So from here, let's copy this update B. Let's replace this with delete. Okay, so we have some few things from here. Okay, so for the updates, let's begin modifying this variable. So first, we don't need anymore this params body. All we need to know is we need this params ID. Now next to that, I'm going to replace this with delete. Now for our execution, let's replace find ID and delete. Okay, so that's all we need for our deletion process. Now, since we have already have those, let's replace this one with movie ID. Okay, so that's all we need for this section. And then let's copy this movie delete. Let's replace that with this section here. And then let's replace this message by saying movie deleted. All right, so that's all we need for movie delete. So next, let's modify now our routes. Now for our routes, we can simply say we just need to copy this one. Now let's replace this section here to delete, but make sure instead of patch, it should be delete. So everything is the same except this function section here. So let's call the delete movie. So from here, okay, so let's head over now to our Thunder client. So what we're going to do now is to delete only this section. So first, let's make a new request. And let's change that to posts. Then we're going to copy this section here, rather the, okay. So maybe we can get that from our patch. So since they're almost similar, so just make sure, okay, here, there you go. So let's replace that to delete. Now for our URL, let's replace this to delete movie. Now for our ID, okay, okay, good. So let's apply now the ID. Now for that ID, I want to delete this ID, this one piece. So let's copy this ID. So take note, this 6544C with an extension of AC Part1. Let's apply that in our delete request. Okay, so yeah, so that's all we need. Okay, so once you're done completed in this URL, so let's try that now by selecting this send button. And there you go. Okay, so that's it. Now to check this value, let's head over to our get request. Just to make sure we have the one piece here and the Avengers. Then click send, and there you go. So that's it, guys. That's all for our backend. Okay, from this point here, our backend is complete. On our next step, let's work now on the front end, which is the app. So let's move to that.